And welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 293. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, I'm Daniel from the Inscriber, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, Gil, our usual other regular guest from Communities Digital News. Um, our hope, fingers crossed, is that she will join us later on in the show. But in the meantime, what's going on, Daniel and Gus?
All good, Mike.
Good evening.
For those who are new, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show slash podcast that discusses all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. Want to find out all information for the time being? The blog page is the place to go to. p4pboxreport.wordpress.com. If you're checking us out live on YouTube, just hit the description below. It'll show you all the information to where to find us all over social media, where you can donate if you'd like. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. If you check out the blog, it will also have similar information as well as where you can check out the show on all platforms that carry RSS feed for podcast purposes like Spotify and iTunes and whatnot, and it also it also provides a link to my online coaching page. I am an online coach for beachbody.com. Free 2-week trials going throughout the year. You might want to check that out, particularly as during this present time when a lot of people are at home. If you're interested in that, if you're interested in any fitness challenges, if you're interested in any of the programs on Beachbody, like Lift 4, like 6 weeks of the work, old school P90X, a shift shop, and etc., please check out my online coaching page there on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. The blog page. Let's get things going. Bit of late breaking news. Sorry for being a little bit distracted here, as what we were going in our preview section, we were going to preview Stephen Fulton Jr. Fighting Angelo Leo for the vacant WBO 122-pound belt. That title recently vacated by Emmanuel Navarrete as he's moving up to featherweight. Well, news broke just a few minutes ago from Fulton via his Twitter page that he is stepping away from the fight due to a positive COVID-19 test result. I'm going to you, Daniel. If you have any more information regarding the story, please provide it. And is there going to be a backup fight now that Fulton and Leo is postponed for the time being?
Yes, there is going to be. I'm trying to look. There is going to be a backup out there, and you see here. Yeah, this was the Fulton thing came out about I know he actually put out the tweet himself a bit ago, but it looks like the people have known of this for Raging Babe has mentioned it. Let's see here. And the replacement that is, I just had it up here. All right, let's see here. All right, Angelo Leo to face Tremaine Williams. So Tremaine Williams is going to be the for Steve Fulton. It was pretty quick. They had them already lined up, which is a really, really good thing. And to work out with the WBO right now, whether Fulton, because he is ranked number one, the number one contender for that 122-pound title for the WBO. If he, once he recovers, is able to fight the winner of Williams Leo, the main event's going to move on, and that's going to be the main event. And I'm actually impressed with how fast they were able to move.
Shout out to Mama Denise for joining us on the show. I'm going to you, Gus. We talked about this fight last week. You mentioned how impressed you were by Fulton, how by his skill and how by his ability. You mentioned he has world title potential. Talk about the level of disappointment you may have right now, given this breaking news.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, not only for ourselves who followed Fulton's career thus far, but for boxing fans to watch a, a name they may not be familiar with. Because I don't know about you guys, but you kind of get bored with the same personalities that are just floated around the news all the time. I'm really into, amateur boxing and new fighters, and watching their transition and how they adapt to the professional ranks. So it's a nice journey to watch that fighter. You can see the amount of development they've had, etc. So and it kind of shows you their characteristics and going forward. So it's always a good barometer for me, certainly from speculation point of view. So I can kind of gauge how well he would do against various stars if I've seen them, boxing back in the past. So yeah, it was. It's a bit of a shame because he's a very talented kid. Um, I kind of think that he's a world champion in the wake. I think he can move up a weight and become a world champion at a second weight as well. I didn't know too much about his opponent, but um, yeah, it's assuming that he's able to recover, sufficiently, because he's still very young. Hopefully, he hasn't got any sort of respiratory conditions which can, exacerbate his problem. So hopefully, it's just precautionary. He can recover sufficiently in a couple of weeks, and hopefully the sanctioning body, they will give him almost like a champion or a mandatory in recess status, so that he can retain that number one status and hopefully fight for the title later on, maybe the end of the year or something like that.
Indeed, and that's what I'm hearing right now. Just reading the news excerpts about this is that there's going to be the replacement bout that Daniel mentioned, and that Fulton, should he recover and hope for a speedy recovery for him, that he will get the first fight. He will get face the winner essentially. And for those who hadn't seen Fulton, Gus is right. It's always good to see kind of a new name, a new fighter on the scene,
Yeah,
because I agree with him. You do. It can get tedious watching the same old fighters over and over again on social media. It's like you'd be like, damn, is anybody else new on the scene rather than the usual old names and others who get hyped about? And this guy is a low key, very good product of Philadelphia, of the Philly Fight Gyms, um, orthodox fighter at 122 pounds, uh, boxer by general, but don't let the record fool you. He's 18-0, 8 KOs, but I think he's a guy who punches harder than his knockout percentage indicates. He's the type of guy who keeps fighters at bay. He keeps them honest, and if you're not really careful, he can really put some pain on you. So again, I hope for a speedy recovery for him. I'm going back to you, Gus. We get into the recaps right now. I want to focus first on the fight that took place last week. ESPN, the top ranked card. Headliner of that card was Oscar Valdez versus Jayson Velez, and Valdez, he won by 10th round stoppage TKO. And I'm reading the reports because I couldn't watch it live. I got home late from work, so I wasn't able to watch the fight live fully. But I'm reading stuff that people like Valdez, he dominated and he was ahead on wide margins on all the scorecards. I was able to watch it in full later, and I'm like, what are these guys talking about? I'm watching Valdez. The same issues that I talked about last week showed itself last week, the night of the fight. Am I wrong in thinking that he is regressing instead of progressing? Because there seems to be a bit of confusion, not just in his style, but in his temperament in there. And if he takes that into a proposed bout against Brochelt, he's not going to just lose. He has a chance to get a stop.
You know, Mike, I think there's various ways in which you can analyze this. I've been thinking about this myself. Now, you know, we've spoken about Oscar on this show, and I mentioned in the past that he was one of those amateurs who I'd followed from the Olympics all the way up, and I predicted him to be a world champion even as soon as he turned professional, because I saw the ability he had. And I'm just thinking, looking at his career now, is it a case? And I'm just playing devil's advocate and just putting out some theories. Is it a case that it's a fighter who potentially may have been burnt out, because he was an Olympian? He was an Olympian in consecutive Olympics, but he was the youngest Mexican at the time. So he's had 2 very long, hard, arduous campaigns coming up against some, Vasily later on. Very difficult. He suffered some bad, comprehensive defeats in the amateurs. So now he's at his second weight in the professional ranks as well. He does a lot of heavy cardio in between fights. Tough, very tough individual. We saw with the Scott Quigg fight, Mike, the amount of blood that was vociferating through his mouth and his jaw, but he kept fighting on. So you cannot accuse this guy of checking out, or he doesn't have any heart or anything like that. He's a tough hombre who will fight on, as he did in that fight, and it was a brilliant fight. So I don't know whether it's a case of, Mike, that it's the case of burning out, second weight, suffered some bad injuries, broken jaw, or is it a case of a combination of that and a bit of identity crisis in between the ideologies of Manny Robles and Eddie Reynoso, who are two very different trainers. Valdez for me was definitely better on the Manny Robles, and I've been very critical of when he won the title against Ruiz, the Argentinian. It's almost like he just changed his style overnight, Mike. He became a little bit too dependent on his power. He became too guilty of just loading up on his punches, very guilty of not moving, because as I mentioned, he was one of the only few fighters who I had seen had the ability to generate power whilst moving on the fly, moving laterally, and that's a very hard skill. For whatever reason, he abandoned those sort of skills, not utilizing his jab and not varying the speed and power of his punches, so he just becomes a little bit too one-dimensional, swinging too much, and that's going to put enormous strain on your body, your shoulders, your rotator cuffs, your elbows. And I thought there is no way his body is going to be able to sustain that sort of style. So when you're up against a Scott Quigg, somebody who deliberately may have come in heavier to get that advantage, and then you end up in a bit of a war with a guy like that, and you shouldn't be, because Quigg is a veteran. So that said to me, you should be knocking out a Scott Quigg who is even heavier. I agree, but Quigg was finished at that point, and for him to be engaged in a war with him, that was not a good sign for me, Mike. And now it's a case that I'm not sure what Eddie Reynoso is implementing into him, but Valdez abandoned very quickly some of the early signs that even Eddie Reynoso was, trying to advocate to him. Velez is a good fighter, Mike. It's not. This is not, as I mentioned, that Velez had shared the ring with many a great fighter, and he did very good things in the fight. He was not overloading with his punching. He was just trying to land shots and come underneath punches, and then land those short right hooks and uppercuts as well, trying to get a little bit closer to Oscar. And Oscar showed some great things. That early knockdown he actually checked him with the wrong hand, so Velez was confused with what punch was going to come, and he just came across with the left hand as well. So it was a very, very, very clever, subtle move. A lot of deception involved. So it shows he's got ability. He's got actually IQ, how to make adjustments as well. But I don't know, Mike. It's a puzzling one for me, and you don't really want to go into a fight with a Mexican brawler like a Vergil, who's very big at 130 pounds. A guy who I don't really have much respect for, Mike. He's a two-handed puncher, but he's got power. That's one thing Miguel has, and he's got power in both hands, and he can body punch as well. I really hope Valdez can knock him out, because I don't have any respect for Miguel, who's held that belt hostage, has done nothing with the belt since beating Vargas. All right, he may have fought a Takashi Miura, but can you remember that fight, Mike? After the early knockdown, Miura had him on the back foot, and Belchet was fighting almost scared, hesitant, almost like a recluse. Just wanted to get the points victory. So that didn't impress me at all. But I don't know, Mike. I don't know. I still got some hope for Valdez in that fight. But I'm not sure whether Eddie Reynoso is I would personally go back to Manuel Robles, Mike. There seems to be some clash of ideology there. There seems to be a lot of confusion, not a lot of direction. I was trying to pay attention to what Reynoso was saying in round 7 and 8, but a lot of the dialect was in Mexican, so I couldn't really comprehend it. But yeah, Mike, worrying times if I was Oscar Valdez at the moment.
To your question about Valdez, I think it could be the combination of the two. You mentioned how he had a long amateur career. As a professional, you put that together, coupled with the fact that as a professional, he's had to work really hard in his fights, even his wins. Lately, over the last year and a half, I say,
Yeah.
I would go back even 2 years, 2 years, ever since he really won the title, he's had to work really hard in his fights, in his wins. You mentioned the quick fight, which was harder than it should have been, but even fights against the Lopez fights, the fights against Jayson Sanchez, they should have been easier. Plus something is not clicking with Reynoso. Valdez hired Reynoso essentially to help him become a more responsible fighter and a better defensive fighter, but yet we're not seeing it. It's like he knows what to do, but he can't pull the trigger mentally to execute it fully. And there's a period of orientation there, and it's just something missing in him that's like he's not fighting naturally. Most fighters when they really have full confidence, they have a natural flow to what they're doing. They do it without thinking. It's ingrained. It's like muscle memory. And that muscle memory aspect under the tutelage of Reynoso is not there. Put it together, and it's making all of his fights rough and tough. And eventually it's going to catch up with him. I'll go to Daniel here. Your thoughts on Valdez's win? Do you share the same level of concern that both Gus and I have?
In many ways, yes, because when I saw the fight, I saw from both the commentary and when, like I said, watching Valdez in the past, some of what you guys are talking about, but situation where Valdez had got used to fight in a certain style for so long, like a rock and sock style, for that when you moved over to somebody else, try to get new wrinkles into the game, you wind up overlearning. Now, when you don't have either the right training camp or you don't have the right sparring partners, or even because of circumstances beyond your control, it may wind up overlearning the new things, and it disrupts what you're able to do before. That's what I saw. I saw a Valdez who was patient and patient. There were times where he hurt Velez throughout the fight, where if it was the same guy that fought Quig, but he's trying to, like you mentioned it, psychologically fight back against, I can't do the rock and sock him thing again, or else I might wind up in a situation with Quig, particularly in a new weight class. And then so you hesitate. What's your main scene? And my fear is, like if Gus mentioned it, like if you go back to Robles, maybe he dives full in and goes full sock, rock and sock him again in the weight division where he may not be able to handle it. Long career, both amateur and now professional. And they have to fix that fast. So they have to fix that overlearning, that hesitation fast, because it looked a bit robotic at some points. And the Valdez that shows up against Vergil, I said it on Twitter, he is getting knocked out. It's just a matter of which round he's going to get knocked out.
So I think the general consensus here is that yes, Oscar Valdez got the win. He continues on, and he'll move to an eventual bout against Vergil either later on this year or early next year. But there is some cause for concern because it's just something missing in terms of how he's fighting. I'm going to split these fights up because I know, Gus, you have to leave in a bit. So I'll go to you on this one. I don't know if you saw this fight, Gus, but Isaac Dogboe, who is on the comeback. He fought Navarrete twice. He got beat. Now, he didn't just get beat. He got beat the fuck up in both of those fights to the point where coming into this fight against Chris Avalos was on the undercard of Valdez and Velez. There was some concern whether he would really be quote unquote back. Dogboe won. I think he stopped him in the 8th round. If you were able to see the fight, your thoughts on how the Royal Storm looked?
Yes, I definitely saw the fight, and I'm glad you came to me with this one, Mike, because when we were giving the preview last week, we mentioned Isaac, but I never realized he was appearing on the card. So it was a pleasant surprise to see him back, because we were all curious to see at what stage of his rehabilitation, whether he had, but it was a confidence rehabilitation exercise, and it must have been a very difficult decision for him to part ways with his father, Paul, because a relationship, that affiliation between a son and his father is extremely deep. And
difficult on a personal level, but
yes,
from a professional standpoint, it was
it was warranted.
He had no choice.
Yeah,
he had no choice.
Absolutely. We spoke about that, Mike. It was a warranted decision. They say a wise man knows his limitations. So, Paul, did a lot of work with the British Armed Forces, teaching fighters how to fight in the army, etc. But he doesn't have that sort of world level experience apart from just, watching his son spars with, Isaac sparred with a lot of good guys coming up to, fighting for the world titles. So Barry Hunter, not a bad move. So we were kind of curious to see what Isaac would bring, and it was a good opponent, because what I was happy to see Isaac in the first round, Mike, he came out, and before he even started throwing double jabs, he was feinting with the left hand very well, dipping from the knees, a bit of, foot feints as well. So I was like, encouraging to see that straight away. So there was encouraging signs that he was taken on the board some new skills from what Barry Hunter and Lamont Peterson and that used to do that as well. So you could kind of see that transitioning over to Isaac, and this was a good little fight, Mike. And Isaac began trading with Chris as well. Wasn't his confidence didn't seem shot at all. He took some shots, but he didn't disengage. Did some nice one or two. I don't know whether in the third, fourth round he did a beautiful sort of step piro around, where he used that double jab and pivoted round onto his left foot, came across with the straight right hand as well. I hadn't seen that before as well. So good to see a young Tartar who suffered, two, very unfortunate for him to come across against Emmanuel Navarrete, a fighter I guess pretty much the entire world didn't know how good he was, challenging for the title at that stage. So, a hell of a guy to have your first title defense against. But when you're 25, 26, Mike, either you're so shot straight away, but Isaac, good to see he's still got something left in him, and I think it's not a bad move with Barry Hunter. He managed to get Chris out of there as well. Stoppage looked a little bit, I don't know, it looked a little bit lax to me, but Isaac was dominated in the fight from round 6, even round 5 all the way across. Wasn't in any trouble. Nice body work as well. I think the body work was really, really getting to Chris. His punch, the snapping Chris's punches had gone after round 5, round 6. So, Isaac pretty much got him and got the stoppage, and that's good for his confidence, because it's all about confidence now. Rehabilitate him, step up the level of opposition. It's going to be difficult for him, Mike, because, at sort of 168 centimeters, with a 65-inch reach, he's always going to have to get close to his opponents to unload with his combinations. So the danger is going to be that how he's going to navigate into the danger zone, because he's going to take in shots coming in. So the key for him, what he was doing early on, feinting with the double jab, getting underneath. He abandoned it a little bit in round 2 and 3, but I could hear Barry Hunter talking to him and saying, look, get back onto your jab as well, because it gives him time to get a breather from his power punches. He doesn't have to bend. One deficiency I saw, Mike, he when he's unloading with his body shots, he's getting too far across and he's bending too much as well with his body punch. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to get too much over his front knee, his lead knee, when he's landing, especially with that left hand to the body as well. So
hell, he's only like 5'2", 5'3". He don't have to do all that extra bending.
Yeah, and he was getting caught with the uppercut once or twice, and he's gonna have to watch out for that, because that's what Navarrete was landing him with, that same lead left hand uppercut. Avalos with his power hand with the right hand, but so he's a bit too open still for that lead left hand, and certainly a taller fighter can land with that left lead uppercut, but other fighters who are behind a high guard, they're able to sort of block, use the cross guard to block that left hand he does, and then come back with the right hand. So that's the one deficiency. I hope Barry Hunter can go back and say, look, watch, you don't have to do that. You don't have to bend too much. You don't have to get across, lean too forward, get off over your lead knee as well. So, he can lean back and do that, Mike. He can I think he can get better traction by maybe what he does in Mike. I think he shortens. His stance is going a little bit too wrong. I think if he can extend a little bit more with his back foot to get better traction and leverage on that uppercut. But it's a technical issue, Mike. So that they can work on that in the skills department. But Isaac Rowe's still some hope for him, Mike. So we'll follow the journey.
Indeed. I'll go to you, Daniel, to talk about this next couple of fights that took place in Indio, California. I'll start with a women's bout first, because drew a lot of ire from fans, particularly from fans of women's boxing and of women's boxers in general. Seniesa Estrada, who is a um, contender at 108 pounds, she fought a lady by the name of Miranda Adkins Daniel. Fight ended in 7 seconds. You knew beforehand that Atkins was not on the level, and it was showed in kind of a gross effect, for lack of a better word, in the fight. Just a series of punches, boom, bam, 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 and the fight was over, and Atkins was out like a light. Uh, I mentioned some fighters, women fighters. Raquel Miller says it's kind of an embarrassment for the sport because it was known that Atkins was not in her league, not even a little bit. Uh, your thoughts on kind of the controversy from a competitive standpoint in the fight, in the fact that given who Estrada is, given her prominence within women's boxing, that Atkins was basically a sacrificial lamb, and that made the fight itself kind of a farce.
First, where to begin? When it came to this, it was meme worthy. It was probably a fight tailor made for Vine, if that still exists in some way, shape, or form. But what's sad about this entire thing when it comes to the situation is if you did not have enough confidence to go into the fight, even though I know this was a last minute replacement, then
Either
you should
Vine or
have not taken the
TikTok.
fight. You should have not taken the fight because you saw how scared that woman was. That was a gazelle, literally staring at a cheetah. It was bad, but this is how bad it was. It was on a statistical level. Do you know what CompuBox counted as a punch? They counted the fact that she flinched a little bit and moved her. I think it was her left hand. No, it was her right. Sorry, just slightly over, and they counted that as a punch, just to try to give them some type of moral victory. But this was pretty bad. This is a situation where I know, okay, you wanted to highlight the opponent, you wanted to showcase a fighter, but there is a difference between showcasing a fighter and then just putting out an embarrassment. This was an embarrassment, unfortunately. I'm not gonna say it's set women's boxing back when it comes to this because there's plenty of times male boxing, but we've seen a similar scenario like this. Maybe not as fast as a knockout, but seen somebody that had no business being in the ring with the other person, and the only reason they were there is because it's the money. This is a circumstance here. Does it hurt women's boxing as a whole? No. Is it gonna hurt Sterna? Yes. It's gonna hurt her in the short run. But if she gets back in the ring as fast as she can with a credible opponent, we know how we are society. What have you done for me lately? If she has a good outing, well, forget about that second fight.
I see Gus has to go, so I'll go back to you for the follow-up fight. The Estrada fight was on the undercard of Vergil Ortiz, Samuel Vargas. Um, Ortiz won by stoppage, and for me, Ortiz played with Vargas, Daniel. And you know why I feel that way? It's because of the thing that Jack Reese was critical of, was criticizing Ortiz. The way that Jack Reese, the referee, was criticizing Ortiz. There was a point in the fight where um, Ortiz was doing old school things in there, turning the guy, spinning the guy. changing angles on the guy. And Reese was there being very critical of him, both during a particular round and even in between rounds. Um, this was nothing for him, Ortiz. He made, easy work. I mentioned that the fact that Ortiz had the confidence to do those kind of things in there, that just told me how easy the fight was for him. We talked about last week, I think Gus mentioned that Ortiz and Jerron Boots Ennis are the future of the welterweight division. Um, Based on this fight, how close do you think an Ortiz is to a world title opportunity?
I would say if everything was normal, he needs to have a shot by the end of the year. I can probably fed out confidence right now say that he's ready for a real world caliber opponent, if not a belt holder already. Because the most impressive thing when it came to Vergil was that he was not nervous when he didn't get the knockout in like the second or the third round. And he was smart enough even to take off a round or two, to not overexert himself. And first, also, we have to give props out to Samuel Vargas, because that man took a beating and kept coming. I'll talk about Jack Reese in a second, but luckily Jack Reese saved the man from himself in the end, because that fight should have been stopped in the seventh round. The seventh round should not have happened at a certain point with the way it was going. But Vergil showed poise. He showed patience. And he showed that he does have a killer instinct, but is smart enough to know that not to overexert yourself while trying to knock somebody out. If I was Golden Boy, considering everything else that's been happening when it comes to the welterweight division, I would get him another high caliber opponent that is a world level, if not a former champion. And I'll say this, you know what? Maybe Oscar and Al can finally sit down, have an actual detente, and maybe, it wouldn't be bad to see Vergil Ortiz versus Sean Porter. That's the type of fight I could see that where Ortiz can really show if it's a good. It's also not only somebody that is a very hard worker when it comes to Sean Porter, but somebody that has held a title, that knows how to turn it on, that can take a punch. So yeah, the kid is ready. It's not a matter of if anymore. It's a matter of when he gets the title shot.
I see. Excuse me. I see Gus has joined us. He's back. We were just talking about Vergil Ortiz and Samuel Vargas, and the issue at hand in terms of Ortiz is how far away he is from a title shot. Daniel was basically saying that he'll put him in there with a big name guy to set him up for a title, and he said in a perfect world that if things were quote unquote normal now with the sport, he would try to have Ortiz fight for a world title at the end of the year. Your thoughts on that, because it was you who said, Gus, that Ortiz and Boots Ennis are the future of the welterweight division, based on what you've seen of him, based on this fight against Vargas, because I said he toyed with him. The fact that Jack Reese was getting on him about spinning and turning a guy. I'm sorry, that's called old school boxing, Jack Reese. You old enough to know that. Why are you criticizing the kid? But anyway, How far off is Ortiz from fighting for a world title? I think he's pretty close.
You know, Mike, Jack Reese didn't have a good night. When you're there's a great deal of difference when you're forcibly turning the guy by either your gloves or you're using your forearms or your elbow to turn the fighter. So it's different from when the fighter is voluntarily turning his back, because he obviously risks expulsion for the fight because he's indicating that he doesn't want to continue. But Vergil was able to use decoy and just pivot all the way around him, and Vargas was still looking at the fucking crowd. He had no idea, and he did that without physically maneuvering the guy. He did it solely based on his own footwork and his ability to sort of pivot, you know, feinting with the left and just go around the other way. It's a bit of a predicament at that point, Mike, because if Ortiz actually lands a blow, then he's actually he'll either hit his opponent in the kidney on the back of the head, so he obviously risks, you know, being disqualified himself. So he's a little bit too cute with that pivot. He's even got to exit about, you know, less than sort of 180. He's got to do it about a 140. Get that angle where he can just cane him with that big left hand and then come over with the right. But he'll learn that. He's 22 years old. Not going to criticize him too much, because, you know, he came into the fight knowing that Samuel Vargas, you know, didn't have much of a chance of winning the fight. A tough kid, you know, Colombian based over in Canada, who had fought Ortiz's peers. So it was a barometer fight, you know. Errol Spence has fought him and Danny Garcia has fought him. So the kid's obviously looking for a high real knockout, and he's looking to dispose of Vargas a lot quicker so he can make a statement specifically to those guys, send a message to them inadvertently that, you know, I'm the real deal and I'm on the prowl for you guys. But Vargas is, if you go and look at his ability, if you look at his performance in those fights, Mike, you know, he didn't do bad. You know, he was on his feet. Errol Spence, who's one of the most privileged fighters, gets away with murder after murder. That was a horrible stoppage in that fight. I don't know if you guys remember it, but Vargas didn't even look remotely hurt to me, and the referee just gifted him with a TKO. You know, Garcia was able to, you know, somersault Vargas a few times, but he got up. Very good powers of recovery. You know, a lot of these guys in these gyms in Canada are actually tough guys. You know, people don't give them credit. You know, they can fight. And, you know, he was on his feet, and I think when they stopped him against, you know, Garcia. So, and he gave Amir Khan a hell of a lot of problems as well. So he's not a bad fighter, and he showed some heart in the fight. He was trading with him, you know, maybe not a wise move against a ferocious power puncher who's got very good hand speed as well. He did neglect his body work a lot in the fight, Mike, because as I mentioned before, he didn't have much fear in his opponent. I think he was just looking to tee off, you know, land some, get into that groove. As soon as he timed him with that uppercut with the straight right hand, he was just coming back with combination after combination. You know, so he neglected his jab as well, because he's got a beautiful, hard, snapping jab. But he was throwing it after his combinations in the fight to get Vargas back off balance so he can come in and sort of, you know, tee off of him. But he didn't. Surprisingly, you know, Vargas didn't go down, but he was bracing himself as well. He was on the back foot getting busted up, so he was bracing. He knew the punches were coming, so you were able to prepare mentally, you know, a lot easier for them. He was able to block, you know, get his head off the line sometimes, you know, take a lot of punches, you know, on the upper body, shoulder, and arms as well. So, but he was shipping a lot of damage, and you know, that fight didn't need to go, you know, 10 rounds or what was it? Stopped I can't even remember what round it was stopped, 7th or 8th, something like that. But
round 7, I believe it was.
Yeah, something like that. So because I guess looking at the odds as well, Mike, a lot of guys were, you know, predicting maybe, you know, the destruction within the first 3 rounds. But there's no harm, Mike. You know, we get a lot with these prospects. As soon as they have one performance where the fight goes a little bit longer in duration, even with the Teofimo Lopez, with the Nakatani fight that went on points, people start, just coming back with ridiculous criticism. And then we saw what Teofimo was able to do against, the Teak Tough and very competent Richard Coma, knock him out. So, boxing fans have just got that short fuse, no sort of patience, no understanding of different styles, what they possess to a fighter. But no harm in going 7-8 rounds, Mike. Not at all. I think in terms of his back to your question about I think Mike, he needs to fight a few more southpaws. If Errol Spence is a potential target for him, an all Texas sort of fight seems like a fight that he wants. I'd get in a few more styles, Mike. I think a few more southpaws or southpaw boxers as well, guys who can fight a little bit on the back foot as well. So I don't think there's nothing wrong with one or two more fights, Mike. Maybe even, why not? Maybe even somebody like an ex-world champion, good fighter. Maybe even somebody like a Kell Brook, Mike, as well. Why not? As maybe your last preparation before you go in as a mandatory, somebody like that, an ex-world champion, very big at the weight as well, guy who can box, good jab, beautiful straight right hand as well. That'd be a real acid test, for the fighters in the ranking. So, but there's time, Mike. He's 22. He can wait 2-3 fights, not a problem.
Indeed, I like the notion of the idea of him eventually fighting a Kell Brook to kind of set up a world title fight. That's a really good idea. I like that a lot. It would be a perfect fight for him too, going into presume world title opportunity, say next year or even 2022 if they want to wait in the cut for a while. Let's move on to some news here.
Now I've got to go, unfortunately, Mike.
No problem. For those who want to talk the sweet science or anything or music, quickly, guys, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, corruption in boxing. I've got a YouTube boxing channel that I've neglected it a little bit, but as the fights have come back, I've got 1 or 2 videos about I'm going back onto the history of the flyweight series and some guys who lost their lives before their prime as well. So I'm trying to do a little bit of a different series. So watch out for some videos that are forthcoming.
One more thing, Gus. It's a comment. Yep. I was going to save it, but it was a comment in response to our talk about Katie Taylor and Persoon. A comment after the show said that Katie Taylor will fight anyone as she's shown with her rematch for Persoon. She said, Serrano, it had nothing to do with money. Katie wanted the Persoon fight instead. She deserves credit for that. After all the criticism from American fans who are a disgrace to the sports, watch it, sir, to the sport of boxing. Persoon went to the Olympics after she couldn't do a rematch, and Katie didn't underestimate Persoon before the fight. You guys should do some research before you talk about these things. Also, Persoon was doping. Since the fight in June 2019, you haven't noticed no opponent who can take Katie unless they have entered VADA testing. Again, do your research before you criticize. You heard Persoon beats the shit out of her. Nice talk. Your response?
That's just utter rubbish. It doesn't matter, what has transpired. That was a ridiculous decision, and the fact that they weren't willing to entertain an immediate rematch says something. And the fact that this fight has only materialized because they were trying to push Amanda Serrano into this position on the back of some narrative about her losing against, or her sister losing against Katie as some sort of a revenge motto. And the fact that fight fell through when Katie should have been entertaining this fight, as Amanda didn't even really want the fight as well. So there's little wonder that fight didn't materialize. They were just trying to push Amanda into this position, which was kind of ridiculous because nobody really wanted the fight between Katie and Amanda Serrano. They wanted Katie to exercise some humility and immediately entertain a rematch in the fight in which pretty much, all of the independent pundits and those people who know what they're talking about know that she definitely lost the fight. So the fact that Delphine was able to still not be too bitter and realize that on the back of a rebound that she agreed terms straight away to fight Katie says something about Delphine. So I don't know who this individual is who's leveling criticism, but he
This
clearly
is
doesn't.
this is Lexi 21. I just want to leave you with that comment from that person before you head off and tend to your business right now, because I know you're overseas, you're on the job right now.
Mike, what about this? What about this doping they're talking about? Has Delphine failed any tests from recollection?
No, she hasn't, but there's supposedly there's some quote unquote issues, because in previous defense at 130 pounds, I think against Melissa St. Ville, or the fight before Melissa St. Ville, she missed an appointment, and she's allowed to take an inhaler when there was some discrepancy, but for that, because she has asthma.
Yes.
So I think it revolves around that.
When drug this has happened in 2 or 3 times, Mike. Whenever
and to be clear, as a point of record, to Lexi 21, when Persoon fought Taylor, both were tested before the fight.
Exactly.
Both were tested after the fight.
Yes.
Both were negative, and both, I think, went through VADA for those testing. So there you go.
Yeah. So when you're making accusations, now a lot of fighters have. There's at least 7 or 8 fighters who have either a therapeutic use exemption for asthma or other bronchial or respiratory conditions as well. But if there's no corroborating evidence of any wrongdoing, then it's not sort of wise to make these sort of accusations. Now, if a fighter is unwilling or has extricated themselves from drug testing in an undisputed fight, then it's very difficult to make those sort of accusations. So it's just a very bitter Katie Taylor fanboy, Mike. So it doesn't.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. So I just want your comments, your response to that before you head off, and have a good very day. I know you're on the job right now. We'll see you, Mike, hopefully next week. Have a good one.
Okay, peace.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Before we head into the news, your response to what that person had to say, and that person, again, to be clear, Lexi 21, who said this basically 23 hours ago, so last night.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I was listening to Stan for a little bit. Because that's what when he said that. That's a Stan. A pretty dedicated Stan. But a Stan. Always Gus laid it out. If Katie Taylor wanted to make the rematch for Persoon, especially in that environment where, like I said, I'm one of the people that will flat out tell you Persoon won that fight. Easily gotten that rematch, but she didn't. We've seen this happen before. Fighters, they know they lost, so they try to avoid it. Like, well, one person we're going to talk about news, Mr. Teddy Garcia. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to certain type of fights, certain has to be made. You can't what a lot of fans think about it because they're dedicated to it. Now, when it comes to Katie Taylor, to be honest, a fight and it broke up for the reason that it could break up. Honestly, I didn't think this fight was going to happen anyway. It's a fight that warrants a crowd. I've said that before, and I'll keep saying it again. Doesn't matter if it's in the UK or New York. It's a fight, and pretty much if you're not fighting Amanda, and if you're not making, in the case of Taylor, a really drastic, real jump in weight to challenge, you pretty much had no other choice when it came to that. When it came to the fights that you can say going in make money for Matchroom. So it's not a situation where Katie Taylor wanted to fight. All she would have made immediately. She would have told Eddie right then and there, make the fight, make the rematch. But she didn't. Or her team thought of the fight than anything else.
So yeah, to that person, who said number one, uh, who here implied that Katie Taylor was quote unquote scared. Um, no one said she was quote unquote scared. Who said that Katie Taylor underestimated Pearson? No one said that last week. And to both Daniel and Gus's point, um, she could have fought Pearson ASAP after the fight. The fight took place in June 19. They could have fought in December. Could have fought early 2020 before the pandemic. Um, but she didn't. They wanted to make the fight with Serrano. Now the question's about whether Serrano really wanted the fight. She initially said money, but she should have Serrano. She should have known that her purse was going to take a hit given our present day circumstances. So it almost comes off as she's ducking. I just have to say that. But yeah, if she wanted to fight immediate rematch with Pursoon, she could have got it. And the only reason Pursoon is getting it is because the Serrano bout fell through. Um, that's the deal. I mentioned the issue about the quote unquote doping. Pursoon has passed all tests and whatnot uh, in the lead up to that fight and test after the fights. So yeah, hope she beats the shit. No, nobody hopes that. Stop it. Um, and check yourself in terms of the American fans. Yes, I am American, but I'm also objective. Uh, that's why I have people from all over. Gus joined us live over from Europe. He does. He checks out the. He if he's not on the show, he makes a point to listen to us live or at a later date. I've had folks from the UK, so stop that, sir. Don't try that here. Don't try that because you criticism from American fans. Stop it. If you don't like it, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your comment, but if you don't like it, move on. And with that being said, we're going to move on to talk about other news here, Daniel. Um, in our discussion about Vergil Ortiz, I think you was the one who mentioned Garcia. Well, news broke late last night that Garcia, he's going to be the comeback up. He's going to be the opponent for the comebacking Errol Spence, as everybody knows. Errol Spence, following his win over Sean Porter last September, was involved in a pretty nasty-looking car accident. Luckily for him, the injuries were not that significant. Some bumps and bruises, but he's been out ever since. But again, we found out last night that he's coming back, going to fight Garcia. The fight is going to happen in the fall. November is the target date. Uh, Garcia was going to be Spence's opponent uh, prior to this accident, prior to the boxing being put on hold due to COVID. Uh, I was critical of it at the time. As soon as I saw Garcia in that turtleneck and at ringside following Spence's win over Porter, I was like, oh dear. Given now, Daniel, given the time that has elapsed from the Porter fight to now, your thoughts on seeing Spence and Garcia this fall?
This, like, given not only the pandemic, like what Errol this would have been the time where you can actually have thrown him a mulligan and said, "I'm going to come back, see if everything works good. You just came back from a pretty bad car crash." When you take that handicap into it, it's not a bad fight. Danny Garcia, we know he's a fighter that it's been said it. He doesn't do one thing great, everything well. He's a well-rounded fighter. And that has gotten him a lot of victories. It has also gotten him some pseudo victories. Should we talk about like Salka? Should we talk about the robbery in Puerto Rico? But he's a well-rounded fighter. Atmosphere within the sphere of the PBC Heyman world. As long as you put in that handicap, like we understand the circumstance, we know that Spence is coming back, and we know right now there's not exactly a full ring of opponents that you want to throw at Errol Spence. The question now, though, is: has Danny Garcia been spending his time working, maintaining his craft really well? Because we have to remember he's in a situation where it's his only client, but we also know that's his father, and we know that when it comes to Angel, he is a person that seeks the limelight more often than not as a personality. See how he's coming back from, but we have to take the handicap
As
into it.
opposed,
It's not a
and you
bad
saw
fight.
that,
If that
and you
didn't
saw
exist now,
evidence
then
of that.
it's
You saw evidence of that with him and him. That social media post sitting him with posing with all of Danny's belts, like he wanted Angel stop.
oh god that oh god that like okay yeah my son won on he won this yes and he also lost and he also lost against Keith Thurman and you know for a fact he also lost Herrera. And you know for a fact that he fought a blown up lightweight who in hindsight I'm glad he beat the fuck up in Rod Salka. But it doesn't change that fact when it comes into it. That unfortunately, if you don't take the handicaps right, it seems just like to make because it's in the Heyman universe. When you put the handicaps into it, it's not a bad fight.
I see Gail has joined us from Community Digital News. Gail does teaching on the side, and she has to take care of her obligations of as far as that, which I personally don't blame because she gets paid for it. So yeah, go get the money. You don't have to. Hey, hey, if you have to step away from the show to do something that gets you paid, by all means, I have no problems with that.
There's the whole shaping young minds thing, but yeah, getting paid good too. Good
Yeah.
evening,
So
everybody. Good day.
what's going on? What's going on? We're talking right now about Errol Spence and his comeback fight against Danny Garcia. A lot of us, a lot of us, a lot of us. This fight was originally talked about after Spence's win over Sean Porter to unify the WBC IBF titles at 147 pounds. At that time, we were somewhat critical of that, and as soon as we saw Garcia and his turtleneck step into the ring, you knew what was up. Given now the accident, the time that he's had off. boxing in its current state, on the comeback from what adjusting to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thoughts on this fight happening now?
It's not just Errol Spence that's on the comeback. We're all on the comeback. The world is on the comeback. Well, we hope we're on the comeback. And things have changed. Circumstances can change very fast with the matchup. Interestingly enough, this matchup makes more sense now. And it's a good test for Spence post-accident, and because Garcia has faced most of the rest of the division and some common opponents. So the Rod Salkas and the Mauricio Herrera robberies aside, first the words I heard when I got on were Rod Salka. What an introduction to this week's show. Nevertheless, I think it's a good matchup for the times. I'm glad both agreed to it. The bigger names can get a little fussy right now because their expectations absolutely have to change. It cannot rest on a cut of the gate. It cannot rest on, huge pay-per-view numbers, lead up, a lot of the things they might have expected, even a media tour. There's just things that can't happen right now. But the fights still can. Boxing's proved, COVID tests aside, that it's more doable than a lot of other sports. So I don't hate it. I'm looking forward to it. I've never been the biggest Danny Garcia fan, and it didn't help that he got the benefit of some very friendly judges more than once. But this time, I'm actually looking forward to the fight.
I want your opinions before we move on a couple of fights we talked about earlier in the show during our recap. They revolve around the PBC card specifically. Given the way that Vergil Ortiz has looked so far in his career, and given the ease in which he, as far as I'm concerned, toyed with Samuel Vargas, how far do you think he is away from a potential world title opportunity? That's number one. And your reaction to the Seniesa Estrada Miranda Adkins fight. I know a lot of people had some very negative opinions of that, felt it was a bit of a joke, given the fact that Adkins really didn't deserve to be in that ring with her. And 7 seconds, that's TikTok worthy stuff. That's not necessarily quote unquote boxing worthy stuff.
It really was. It did look like a TikTok video, didn't it? What a shame. Well, let's talk about that one first. That was a horrific miscalculation. I don't think anyone had designs on that happening. Adkins was a late replacement opponent. She willingly took the fight. She looked equipped. The commission agreed, and we saw what we saw. It's the times, it's the circumstances. Some of these make good fights are pushed together quickly, and this one didn't work. Andy Foster, who's the head of the California State Athletic Commission, said just a few days ago he really regrets having given the green light to the fight. But it's a hindsight is 2020 issue. Thankfully, it looks like no permanent harm was done. Estrada is a monster. She went after her. She said that when she connected the first punch, she just started letting it fly. That's her job. That's her job in the ring. Not her fault that she caught the opponent, first of all, unaware, and then, unfortunately, clocked her so quickly, she was just unequipped. She couldn't steady herself, and when somebody that relentless is on top of you, you don't stand a chance. The truth is, medical science frequently shows that a fighter suffers less damage from a single knockout punch, as bad as it is, and as bad as this looked, than a sustained beating. A Bradley Provodnikov kind of fight is far worse, truthfully. I wish Adkins well. I think we need to be a little bit forgiving, but we do need to learn from this. You can't put fights like that together. You just can't. Now let's go on to Vergil Ortiz. I'm on the Vergil Ortiz train. I've seen virtually every single one of his fights in person, save his last fight in Texas. That young man is the goods. I think we can all agree. The only difference of opinion for anybody, I think, at this point is how far along is he in his path to getting a title shot. I think he's a lot farther along than people think. I truthfully think he could handle it in his next fight. Will that happen? No, I don't think so. But Golden Boy needs to find somebody in the welterweight division willing to face him who's a step up. And the problem is the PBC controls a lot of those names. So it's going to take some creativity, especially in this environment. It's going to need people to work across the aisles and do business.
To that point, Gail, excuse me for interrupting. Before he had to dip out, Gus proposed a fight between Ortiz and Kell Brook. Your thoughts on that?
I think he'd blow Brook right out. I just don't see it. He of course wants the big names, but the big three names that he mentioned were Keith Thurman, who I think would be a dandy fight for him. I really do. Crawford and Sean Porter. Now, he didn't mention Spence. He clearly has enormous respect for Spence, and he's humble enough not to put himself in that category yet, and I think smart enough also not to mention his name just yet because of the shade he'd get from people who are in the Spence camp and others who think that, he is not quite there. The other fighter that was mentioned to him in the post-fight news conference that he said, yeah, that'd be a great fight, was Yordenis Ugas. I wouldn't hate that fight at all. I really wouldn't. Luis Collazo has been mentioned. I think that's a doable fight. I don't love it, but I love it better than nothing, and I love it better than a make good fight. We'll see what happens. He seems willing to take anybody on. He's super disciplined. He's super serious. Somebody's crunching their dinner or their snacks there. And you're killing me. I'm starving. And teaching class is hard work. And I think he'll take whoever it is. I gather his most realistic plan is to come back maybe October, November, maybe when things lighten up a little bit, get on a card with a decent name who has been in against top names, either current or recently, and just move them along as fast as they can. But, so many fighters that are quality, just find themselves in a holding pattern. It's just a rough year. That's the way it goes. Fortunately, he's got a little time to burn. He's only 22 years old, so I'm not too worried about him. He just needs to stay busy in the gym, which isn't a problem. He's very disciplined. So I think he's, frankly, in better shape than a lot of other people in the division because he can wait this out a little bit. In his best years, we're assuming this, but you would think his best years are way in front of him. And that's scary considering what he looks like now.
I'll go to you, Daniel. This is kind of a simple wording here, but the simple topic, but the context of it is very vast. It's going to take some time here. PBC has announced their upcoming schedule for the rest of the year, and I have to say that in comparison to what we saw from Top Rank and even what we're seeing from Eddie Hearn, my goodness, PBC is trying to stomp fools out, trying to put foots on folks' necks because for those who want to argue that boxing, since it's come back in the midst of COVID, has been kind of quote unquote boring, not in this case. We mentioned earlier how Stephen Fulton had to step out from his bout against Leo because he tested positive for COVID. Well, That was going to be the beginning of the PBC and their series of fights to close out the year. But after that, they got David Benavidez fighting his mandatory on the 15th. On the undercard of that, going to have Rolando Romero fighting, I think, Martinez for the interim belt at 135. A pretty competitive heavyweight matchup on the undercard of that. Otto Wallin fighting Travis Kaufman. In September, you got Erickson Lubin fighting Terrell Gausha. Tug Nyan Bar on the undercard of that fighting Eduardo Ramirez in an eliminator. Boots Ennis on that same September 19th card. On the 26th, you got Jamal Charlo fighting Dervinchenko. On the undercard of that, Brandon Figueroa, Diego Magdalena's fighting. Jermel Charlo is fighting Jayson Rosario on that same card. October 10th, you got Sergey Lipinets fighting. October 24th, you got Tank Davis fighting Leo Santa Cruz. On the 18th, you got a pretty decent featherweight bout featuring Chris Colbert. In December, you got Obali fighting Nonito Donaire. So, yeah, PBC, they are really bringing it to close out the year, and I can't be mad at what they're doing.
Is it fair to say that they unloaded the clip
with nothing left in the chamber
call in that announcement? Because they unloaded the clip. Yep, nothing. They might have unloaded 2 clips. Oh, and
right.
Also, this is the very interesting thing I know because we've been laughing at the situation last year. We're laughing at the situation. The report times demise in boxing looked to have been greatly exaggerated. Guns blazing to go into it, and they're doing it in the manner that how the PBC has done business, where we're going to give you a buttload of an assload of content and in abundant areas where you may not have to wait as long as for a Matchroom or for a Top Rank or Golden Boy. We're going to give it to you like this, including pay-per-view. As insane as it sounds right now with the current situation, they gave you 2 pay-per-view bouts. One of them, I can say, okay, you can make somewhat of a case. The other one, I don't know as much. But it is very, very good going into it. Steven Espinosa looks like he'll probably get Executive of the Year now. If everything goes well, if Fulton is the only thing I'm hoping for a lot, if Fulton is the only thing that gets derailed during everything because of COVID, because of Steven Espinosa will be that meme of the runner that's coming up way behind what they're just jogging and then just takes the race at the end. For executive, like a television executive of the year, comes to boxing. If this goes off, farewell. Nothing has shown me that it will, though, but this was a very, very good showing. And all many need to say is, can you guys please rethink the pay-per-view stuff?
Indeed. I'll go to you, Gail, quickly. Your reaction to this, because PBC, to quote Daniel, they uploading the clip, no barrels left. They coming to kick ass and take names with this kind of schedule.
That's right, and it's a full 15 rounds too. So in the clip, you know, Steven Espinosa is laughing at all the people who threw shade at him, who said Showtime was dead, their schedule sucked. Well, you know, they waited to pull the trigger until the time was right. And, you know, last year in a very rich media environment, the streaming services all fighting each other and paying crazy amounts of money. They did not get into the bidding war. Now it's their model that can survive. They're supported by the subscriptions, so their basic costs and personnel are all covered. They can afford to use it as a draw for a certain demographic of viewers and then use it to advertise the rest of their programming, which is one thing they've always done with sports. And it could serve as a platform for some of the pay-per-views. And Daniel, I know none of us love pay-per-view, right? But without a gate, it's one of the few revenue models they've got. That I don't blame them. I don't blame them. Now, what they can't do is hand us $80, $75, or really even a $69.95 price tag. If they bring these in under $50, yeah, I'd love it if it was $39.95 for everybody, but I don't think that's going to happen. Bring it in under $50. Then you've got a shot, especially for your event where you've got, dueling Charlo brothers fights, right? You're going to get to watch essentially parts of two cards. That's a good deal. I think that will be a draw. It's one of the rare PBC cards with a really terrific undercard. I think it might be the best top to bottom card could have been that they've ever done, honestly. So applause to them. Now they're getting, though, into what's real about boxing in the post-pandemic era. Their first main event fighter tests positive for COVID-19 right out of the gate. But to their credit, they had the backup plan in place, ready to go. They didn't miss a beat. The minute the test came in, confirmed he's gone, boom, we get the other fights and and opponents reconfigured, everything's good, they're all a go. That's what they've got to do, and the fans can't get too hot and bothered about that. It's going to happen, safety first, and we should feel reassured that the process is working versus some of the team sports where a bunch of guys test positive and they say, well, we'll just keep playing anyway until somebody finds out, until we feel bad. No, that's not how it works.
Before to say when it comes to the team sports, I know exactly what team we're talking about right now.
Well,
Let's just make a table does
it's what
say
everybody is talking about right now.
Happen.
I mean, come on. Y'all decide, we'll just keep our 13 or 14 positive tests to ourselves. No, that's not what this is meant for. Boxing has an advantage because they can isolate, they can reconfigure bouts. They have far fewer athletes and staff to worry about. They can isolate some of the support teams. So while you could lose a trainer or a cut man or a manager, it doesn't necessarily mean the event is off now with the current protocol. So it's a little easier, but they've still got to be prepared. But the truth is, every promoter, if they're smart, if they plan ahead, and many don't, but the good ones all have somebody on the payroll on standby for that opponent that just tends to have that dust up with the law right before a fight, or just is maybe gonna pop positive on a drug test, or they've just got an unfortunate track record of blowing through weight. So you have a guy on standby. You pay a secondary opponent. It happens all the time. The whole protocol is already there. That's something that other professional sports have never had to worry about. So boxing and combat sports have a tremendous advantage where that's concerned. So I say bravo to Showtime. I'm bravo to PBC and for doing what they could do and giving us a really nice slate of fights.
First of all, I want to give a shout out to Unrivaled Boxing, joining us live, listening to the show live from overseas. Gus, who's at the job right now, at work right now, but listening to the show still, he said, don't forget the highlight for him, which is Danny Roman versus Emmanuel Rodriguez. And to unravel your point in the chat, it hasn't been officially announced, but what Gus mentioned about that fight, I'm hearing it is indeed going to happen. It's just nothing been officially announced, but um, I've heard enough that I'm pretty sure that is going to be Roman's next fight. So look for that fight to happen, though nothing official has been put forth to the media. But yeah, back to the point about PBC and that certain sport, which will remain nameless because do enough shade on here. Yeah, this can only be applauded. To Daniel's point, for those who talked about Showtime's great demise, that was grossly exaggerated. And say what you want about PBC, you can't hate on them what they're doing here. This is more than all good. This is great. Not just a lot of fights, but a lot of competitive fights with plenty at stake. I have nothing bad to say about this at all. Going to go to both of you at the same time for these next two topics as we begin to close out the show. Go to a bit of sad note first before we get to the hilarity that is our final topic. And that is a few days ago, boxing lost a great man. I'll go to you on this one, Gail, first, and that want to note and to pay our respects and our tribute to Brother Naazim. Naazim Richardson, famed Philly fighter who passed away a few days back. You cannot talk, Gail, Bernard Hopkins without talking Naazim Richardson. Brother Naazim, he came through within the ranks in the Philly boxing gyms or whatever under the tutelage, the guidance of Bowie Fisher, who was, and the two of them together, the great fighter that Bernard Hopkins became was because of those two men. When you look at kind of the resurrection of Shane Mosley's career, because after he lost those two fights to Vernon Forrest in 2002, there was a bit of a rut in his career until he linked up with Naazim Richardson, and under his guidance, Mosley became a world champion again at 147. When you talk about Antonio Margarito being exposed as a quote unquote dirty fighter, the guy behind that, Brother Naazim, who prior to Margarito's fight against Mosley in 2008, Richardson noticed something awry when it came to the wrapping of Margarito's hands, made him take off the tape and rewrap. And when they took off the tape, they noticed some kind of hard surfaces coming from the glove. And you saw from there, basically Margarito was exposed for wrongdoing. Oddities is the wrong words, but he has some interesting, colorful language to describe what he wanted to do in there. There's a terrific clip on Twitter, "Swim without getting wet." One of his sayings, many sayings in there, but he was a damn good trainer and a damn good man. Talk about the trainer, the man that was Brother Naazim.
Brother Naazim was carrying on the modern legacy of fighting out of Philadelphia, which had its glory days and were somewhat past, but he absolutely carried the mantle and kept it alive for years, taking over when he did, training Bernard Hopkins, later for Mosley, also trained Steve Cunningham.
Right.
He also recently had started training his nephew, who many people know in some other context, Carl Dargan, who I worked with on and off because he's a main events fighter. So he went back to his uncle, Brother Naazim, to train at home in Philadelphia. So we had a chance to chat, Carl and I had to call the gym. So we had to call through Brother Naazim, who never ever fails to take an opportunity to teach, to pass on what he knows. He's generous with his time, he's generous with his thoughts, and all of the great trainers are great teachers. It's wired in their DNA. And it's not only about how to throw a punch, how to move, how to protect yourself, tactics. No, it's always about a lot more than that. How to conduct yourself as a human being, how to live your life in an upright way outside the ring. That's where honestly they have their real value. And a lot of trainers like Brother Naazim are willing to take on somebody, who's a little bit of a tough case.
Excuse me, Gail. Correction. That fight between Mosley and Margarita was in 2009, not 2008. I just wanted to make that correction.
Yeah. One of the people who he took under his wing quite a bit, who's a bit of a rising star young trainer, is Stephen Breadman Edwards. He talked about how the last person that was in the locker room with him when Julian J. Rock Williams lost to Charlo was Brother Naazim, and the last guy in the locker room when J. Rock came back to beat Jared Hurd, Brother Naazim. So this is a man who's left a lot of disciples in the widest possible sense of the way you can describe that word. His two sons, I believe, Tiger and Rock Allen, I think are going to keep the gym open. I'm not sure what's happening there, but the truth is that Brother Naazim has not been well for some time. So we'll have to see what happens. But his legacy is more than secure, and left not only in his family, but in his boxing family. Upon his passing, Bernard Hopkins posted to social media and said, "I lost my dad early this morning." That's the kind of relationship a trainer like Brother Naazim has with his charges. And everyone called him Brother Naazim. Everybody. I mean, I bet there are people in this world that don't know what his last name is, Richardson, for the record. So rest in power, Brother Naazim. Such a class man, a great trainer, but a greater human being.
I'll give you the opportunity now, Daniel, to speak your piece, to give your tribute to Brother Naazim.
Naazim Richardson. He's one of the many good, hardworking, East Coast-based trainers that never, mainly because of either the circumstance of their opponents or because their involvement in something else that overshadows a lot of things. But you Philadelphia area, if you even just passing by, you know how much he meant to that city. You know the impact that he's going to leave comes to fighters and other trainers and promoters in the city of Philadelphia. Obviously, the biggest thing is, like you said it in the beginning, Mike, you can't say Bernard Hopkins without Naazim Richardson. He was there from the beginning. It wasn't a situation where he jumped right after when B Hop was already getting to fame. He was there when it happened. He was there for and helped with Shane Mosley in the biggest fights of his careers. And like I said, that's the one they were shadowed for, the involvement in the Margarito situation, unfortunately. That will overshadow a lot of what he has done. He's been a trainer. He has been an advisor. He has been just so talk to, no matter what. And it's not only said, not only Shane Mosley, not only Bernard Hopper, Steve Cunningham, Joe mentioned Carl Dargan. He even did help out a little bit. I forgot about this, but looking back now, I remember seeing footage him helping out Sergio Martinez when it came to his fight against say Junior. But it he leaves a really, really lasting legacy. He's one of those, like Gail mentioned, like you don't even know the other name, like brother Naazim. He's like Mr. Bashir in a way. Like not a lot of people outside will know that his full name is James Ali Bashir. Not a lot of people know that brother Naazim is Naazim Richardson. People will know that he had a stroke about almost a decade back and wasn't able to talk for a bit, wasn't able to move for a bit. So he came back, he fought through it, and from the few times you see in interviews and the many times that you hear him talk, a human being to be around. And you don't get that a lot. Philadelphia doesn't have the right people like you can talk to that way. At least they're from Philadelphia. Brother Naazim was one of those people. The boxing world lost somebody really, really good. And it'll take a very, very long time to find that's going to be able to replace it. But there will come somebody. He has a pretty substantial coaching tree, if you might, of disciples that his teachings and the way he has trained, whether he teaches boxing, will follow. We're definitely going to miss him. And like I said, my thoughts to his family and my thoughts are Bernard Hopkins when it comes to this, because no other fighter was as close to what Naazim as B-Hop was.
Indeed, hell of a trainer and equally hell of a person. Definitely a staple within the Philadelphia boxing. We here at Pound for Pound Box Report, to echo what Daniel said, send our condolences to the family, the friends, and the loved one of Brother Naazim. Naazim Richardson, may he rest in power. We go from that sad note to strange, awkward turn as it was announced, I think it was last week after the show, that after our recording last week, that apparently, Daniel, this much talked about quote unquote exhibition is going to happen September 12th, as we've all seen the videos of Mike Tyson training and working out, those 30 to 45-second clips. Tyson announced he's coming back, and guess who stepped up to the plate to be his opponent? One Roy Jones Jr. People will eat it up. I worry, because let's just face it, as much as a lot of folks love Mike Tyson, you know, there are times where his screws are not all the way tight. His screws can be loose. And I know this is an exhibition, but there's a part of me that fears for Roy Jones, because you just don't know what Tyson, he may not take this as a quote unquote exhibition. Hell, he's training like it's a real fight. And while you see Jones working in the past with Chris Eubank Jr. in flip flops. We know the concerns about Jones in recent outings when he's last fought. He's been doing. It's been more of a case of him getting knocked out than winning. Um, I know this is supposed to be a fun thing, Daniel, but I kind of got an eerie feelings about this, particularly as it pertains to Roy Jones. My fear is that Tyson will take this ultra seriously, and with Roy Jones, all it takes for him these days is one punch. I don't mean one punch to knock a guy out. I mean one punch from himself getting knocked out. Um, I don't like this, Daniel. I must admit, I don't like this at all.
Oh, Jesus Christ. This is where this at. Tyson's already talking about wanting to be undisputed champion again. Which got antsy about it. Which is gonna feed more into Tyson's ego. And that is yeah, I fear mainly for everybody involved in this, because yes, Roy Jones can be flamboyant. Yes, Roy Jones can bring up a lot of hype into it, but we're dealing with a man who was a good idea to have a tattoo on his face. And it wasn't part of a gang initiative. He just thought one day, I'm just going to put a tribal symbol on my face. That somehow made him even more endearing when it happened. But gee, yeah, Gun is going to go crazy in this because he's going to talk. And because, unfortunately, with the generation of heavyweights that we have now, the top 3 heavyweights all like to talk. And we are, like I mentioned, Joshua's already yapping at him. Deontay, particularly everything, he might start yapping. And could you imagine the Twitter war between Mike Tyson and Tyson Fury?
Oh gosh.
That's what we're feeding when we're getting this through. I know, exhibition. It's not supposed to be good. We've seen exhibitions turn bad before. We've seen things that were supposed to be lighthearted go sideways. In all aspects of life, when it comes to, it just takes one match to light a fire. One match and the right combustible element. And that could just be Roy Jones in somewhere he does not like to get hit in. And unfortunately, I'm just gonna replay from Russia of Roy Jones being laid out in such a way where you kind of were afraid he wasn't gonna come back from Russia completely with all his senses intact. Luckily, he did. But no. Please, no. Like, none back. No to Tyson coming back. No to Evander coming back. Because at this stage, you guys are going to get where you might get some of the older heads coming back. Because this fed also Oscar thinking of coming back. And then you're ultimately going to feed the one person who had to butt himself into this, Mr. Mayweather. And then everything will go off the rails.
I'll go to you, Gail. Your reaction. Do you have the same reservations as I do? Because I'm looking at this like, yeah, I know this is supposed to be all fun and everything, but This could end very, very badly.
I love me some Roy Jones. I love me some Roy Jones. Good for Roy. I don't think I'm quite as troubled about it as you two gentlemen are. They're grown ass men, and they have the right to make their own decisions, even when they're bad ones. This is being sanctioned, believe it or not, by the California State Athletic Commission. Admittedly, the same folks that let Ms. Adkins face Seniesa Estrada, but that's another point of discussion. They are going to wear 12-ounce gloves. Headgear, nobody seems
I hope so.
Well, nobody seems to know about the headgear issue. Now, I've seen Roy doing a lot of interviews. He seems to be taking this in good humor and fairly realistic. And he says, hey, I get it. I like Mike. He called me. We made the fight. It seems like everything's copacetic between them. But Roy has said, hey, I get it. Tyson's a loose cannon. He might bite my ear. He might, get riled up and punch the crap out of me. He gets it. Roy has had some pretty unfortunate outcomes. He's fought, I think we could all agree, way too long.
Unfortunate?
Yeah.
The Lebedev fight alone. He looked like Lebedev looked like he killed him.
I'm being kind. But so did Tyson. So, this is exactly the kind of hype and discussion that sells pay-per-view. This is an interesting venture for a new streaming service, using this as a launch pad. I think it's a gaming platform. Am I right? I must admit, I have not looked deeply into this new sponsor. They're going to do it at Dignity Health Sports Park, aka StubHub. I assume no audience, no fans. Now,
see, even Gail's dog in the background just like saying, "Yeah, that's StubHub."
Troubled. He's a senior boxer himself, and he's troubled. But I'm not sure if there are going to be any observers or VIP types. It's outdoors, and I think there's some interesting potential there for it kind of a glorified studio setup, but the coronavirus gets a vote. I think at this point, it's all pretty good, harmless fun. They're going to sell the shit out of it. When my 85-year-old mother, who dislikes boxing because her husband was obsessed with boxing and her daughter ended up being obsessed with boxing, asks me, hey, is Mike Tyson fighting again? And I said, what did you just ask me? When it hits her radar, that's a cultural event beyond what the boundaries of boxing are in our culture in 2020. And I'm not upset about that. If there can be any cross-pollination to the true talents in our sport right now and the true champions, especially in this, terrible sports universe, yes, I get the downsides, but I'm not really seeing them through the clouds of optimism about this. So I think I'm willing to let it ride for a while, and my concerns really aren't at the forefront. I'm intrigued to see where this goes, and what an interesting set of personalities. Clearly, however, I'm sure there will not be drug testing for this fight. I'm just saying.
Nah, Tyson smokes way too much weed for there to be a drug test during this fight. I think we're going to shut down the show on that note. I want to thank Gus, who was on the show earlier. He joined us in the live. He also joined us on the live YouTube chat. I want to thank Unrival as well. You can check out Gus, who you mentioned earlier. You can check him out on YouTube on Corruption and Boxing. Does a lot of previews, does a lot of analysis of errors, of analysis of divisions and whatnot, and breakdown of divisions and fighters and so forth. I'll go to you, Gail for Communities Digital News, who joined us late, but understandably so, teaching gig on the side. And again, I don't. If you do a gig and you get paid for it, by all means, you can skip the show and come on late. I have no problem with that. And you are teaching folks, so you can kind of get the best of both worlds. But anyway, if you for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, let the folks know where they can find you.
I thank you for accommodating me, and thank you to the listeners for letting me barge on in halfway through the show. You can find me in my regular column at Communities Digital News, which is COM, COMM, Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com, and occasionally in the Peanut Gallery on TMZ Live.
Yeah, well, Gail's becoming a little bit of a celebrity there.
I'll be back next Monday.
Basically, it's in my regular spot now on TMZ, so I applaud her for that. I'll go to you, Daniel. Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk NBA, specifically the Miami Heat. And given that the NBA season restarts tomorrow, I believe it is. We're recording the show live on the 29th. The NBA restarts their season July 30th. Boxing, NBA, Miami Heat. For those who want to talk about all of that, Daniel, let folks know where they can find you.
You can find me, folks, on Twitter at Ruckus99, RKWKUZ. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about sports as long as they last. I'm not talking baseball right now because of obvious reasons, unfortunately, but we'll definitely see what's happening. Definitely see what's going on because Top Rank took a little, like we mentioned before. Showtime is coming ready to more than ready to fill the. So is Matchroom.
Absolutely. And for those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR, on Twitter at Brother JR76. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the fight between Williams. I think is Rasim Alim. I think it is for the WBO junior featherweight title, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show. Breaking news: Stephen Fulton, who was going to fight Angelo Leo for that belt. Fulton had to step aside due to a positive COVID-19 test. So we will talk about the Tremaine Williams. He's going to be fighting in the interim on there. We will also do a recap. We didn't talk about this fight during the show, but Srisakat Rungvisai, he's making his return to the ring following his loss to Gallo Estrada last year. He's going to fight former flyweight champion Amnat Rungroy. That's going to be a junior featherweight bout. So we will do a recap of those two bouts. And I'm going to do a preview of a women's bout, pretty intriguing women's bout. Terry Harper, who we mentioned last week on the show, she's going to defend her WBC 130-pound title against Natasha Jonas. Harper, very good 130-pound fighter from England. If she wins, look for some big things for her coming forward in the moments ahead, I should say. So she's a very good fighter. I think she could potentially be a future opponent for one Katie Taylor, say next year or maybe 2022. So be on the lookout for her. We will preview her fight with Natasha Jonas, her title defense there. So I want to thank Gus for joining us on the show. Thank Gus for in live chat. Thank Unrivaled Boxing in live chat. For Gail from Communities Digital News. Daniel from the Inscriber. I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 293 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. Make sure, if you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, also that like button, and please leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find the show on podcast formats. We're just about everywhere. So please, all reviews are welcome. 5-star review will get read during the show. Episode 293 of Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.